Welcome to This Week with EdSurge. I'm Ira Apfel, editorial director here at EdSurge. When a machine can do the work in seconds, what's left that a student still has to do themselves? Our first guest asked that question after watching his kids get confused in a record store. The second got there watching one of their own students turn to a chatbot mid-lesson. Two different settings, same question. Let's start in the record store. Our next guest wrote one of the more unique pieces about AI we've read this year. Nathan Kraai is Director of Innovation and Design Thinking at the Fenn School in Concord, Massachusetts, and he's here to talk about why watching his kids get confused by a turntable made him rethink what AI means for the classroom. Nathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ira, for having me.
So Nathan, take us back to that moment in the bookstore. Your kids couldn't understand why anyone would buy a record when streaming exists. So what was it about that question that really stuck with you?
I think it was because I didn't have an answer in the moment, but my kids were naturally curious about it. And as I noticed over probably the last couple years, the growth in vinyl has just exploded. And so it kind of struck me, well, why is this really something that people are gravitating towards? And I sort of started to see parallels, with my work around AI and in school. I think that human part to it, when I began to think a little more deeply about it, it was really the humanity piece where it's, a vinyl is tangible. You can look at the liner notes. You can play one song at a time. You're not skipping to different artists and different parts of a record. So it makes you have to be more present in the moment. Where I think a lot of times, at least with my kids, they'll put on music and it'll almost be a background to whatever else they're doing.
You draw a direct line between vinyl's resurgence and what's happening with AI in schools. How is AI being deployed in your classroom? And what are you seeing from students there in terms of, are they embracing it, or are they kind of a little wary of it right now and they want that human connection?
I see kids sort of on both sides of the spectrum. I look at my own children specifically first, and they're really hesitant about using AI. I think we've done sort of a disservice to a lot of our kids where they view it as cheating, and we just sort of label AI as this is what you use if you want to cheat. If you don't want to do your work, use AI. And I think there's a really big distinction between that cheating piece and actually leveraging AI to enhance the learning. You have a lot of teachers who are skeptical about using AI, especially in the younger grades, and worried about students just taking the easy way out versus as we get older, thinking more about the AI literacy piece and how we can sort of prepare students and put them into situations where they're using AI to enhance what they're learning. So we want them to see that AI isn't just for cheating, but it's also to improve their learning or help them to become more successful. I think a lot of kids, especially at our school, view it almost detrimentally, that they're hearing from a lot of people that yes, it's really bad for education, or it's going to ruin education. And if you're using it, you're cheating. And so trying to make those distinctions for the kids is difficult. But my goal is that they can start to learn when to use AI because it's so accessible, and when that will help them in their learning. And also opportunities for going AI free and saying, you know what? We don't want you to offload any of your thinking. Even if you don't love the idea of a little bit of productive struggle, that's what really makes learning stick. And when you're in charge of that and not outsourcing it, you'll learn more, you'll improve, you'll become a better human being.
You write about in your article about sitting in on ninth grade capstone rehearsals where students had to research, and they had AI tools that could draft a polished speech in seconds. But the real challenge was deciding what mattered and which stories to tell. Why did that moment ultimately leave you hopeful instead of being worried?
I think it was the idea that there are certain parts of learning that are still AI resistant. And when you get really personal, in this case, this ninth grade capstone was was designed to be incredibly relational and human centered. And so our students were working with nonprofits across Boston to help solve real life problems that these nonprofits were having. So it wasn't something that could be outsourced to AI. Yes, they could ask AI to brainstorm solutions to certain problems, but it was hyper local and hyper specific. And that's not something that AI can generate formally or realistically. And so they're trying to decide like whose story, whose voice is the most important. And I think that's where humans and AI can kind of coexist, that we can still have the human relational, emotional piece, and we can benefit from AI inclusion as well. So thinking that way, I thought, man, yes, they have every tool at their disposal, but they were taking all of the information that they had learned from their empathy interviews, from visiting places. They realized, hey, AI actually wouldn't be the tool here. Our own experience and our own understanding of the problem will help us to achieve a better outcome.
At one point, you bring in Jane McGonigal's idea from her book, Imaginable, this distinction between trends and signals. You're calling AI the trend and the vinyl resurgence the signal. Now, if you're an educator listening to this podcast, why is this signal particularly interesting?
I'm really fascinated by what the future holds for education. I think that's always been part of my job description, but it's something that fascinates me. And I think Jane McGonigal does a really good job in the book talking about, yes, there's these big trends that have already happened. What helps you kind of understand the future and going forward are these signals, these smaller things that maybe are on the periphery of our everyday lives and maybe not as noticeable or not as impactful. And so when you're seeing a signal in a tech heavy world, a signal saying, hey, you know what? People are gravitating towards slowing down. They're gravitating towards having some friction in something that we've already made incredibly efficient. We've made streaming services as efficient and easy as can be, but people are gravitating towards things that are a little more challenging, a little more difficult, like they're actually physically having to touch, a record and a record player and hearing it scratch. Or I think these smaller signals are kind of broadcasting that, hey, people really are missing out on that human element in their lives.
I want to get back to something that you mentioned earlier, cognitive offloading. It's a phrase that you address in the article. What does that term mean in a classroom context, and why do you think it's become the go-to phrase for so many teachers?
It's a fearful phrase. Cognitive offloading is saying, "Hey, I'm going to take all of my thinking and hand it off to artificial intelligence. I want artificial intelligence to do all the thinking for me because this is either too difficult, this is too time sensitive, or I'm just not interested in it. So I don't really want to do the thinking, but I do want the outcome." And so that is a huge fear for teachers. I'm fearful of it as we talk about artificial intelligence because it's so easy to cognitive offload our learning. And I'm incredibly fearful for kids who often see school as like a zero sum game where, the end goal is that letter grade and they need to do whatever they can to get to that grade. And so if you make it so easy, I don't disagree that, utilizing artificial intelligence makes it so incredibly efficient and easy for students to get to that outcome without even trying.
Have you caught yourself falling into the cognitive offloading trap? Have you found yourself saying, you know what, I'm sure AI can do this, but I really need to kind of break away from AI for this particular task or your role as an educator and get back to the human stuff?
I would say on the daily, I'm having that kind of difficult decision to make where it would be easy for me to just farm out, an email to a colleague. I think a lot of the time as an adult, I'm not as worried about the cognitive offloading because I usually am thinking, hey, if I don't put my attention towards this might give me more bandwidth to do something that I have on my to-do list today that I really find important or engaging or it's more serious. Where with students, I feel like they haven't learned necessarily the basics. And so I don't want them to sort of skip that piece. Let's say it's English class and they're writing an essay. I don't want them to farm that piece out to AI. Yes, there's certain opportunities for them maybe to use it as helping with brainstorming or revision or something like that. But they haven't gotten to the point where they have mastered a lot of these skills or knowledge that we want them to.
And I'm wondering at your school, how much of the AI implementation has been kind of a partnership with you and the other teachers and also the administrators and the school leaders? Or was it a case where they're just like, hey, Nathan, you're the IT guy, director of innovation. You tell us what to do about AI and have at it.
Initially, I think it started with me. I was the de facto person that sort of got thrown into, hey, you're director of innovation, so you will know about um, you're going to know about AI and you're going to know what we should do with it or without it. And I was like, this is a really big issue. I don't think I could handle it on my own. So we sort of developed an AI task force, if you will, of teachers and administrators who were interested in AI and thinking about policy and how it might look at our school. But the nice thing about our AI task force and having other voices is that we have people who are pretty anti AI overall, especially working with students. And so I think it's valid to hear their point, and hear their decision making behind it. And I think that helps us craft a stronger policy, or for us, it's more guidelines.
You pose this big question in your essay, which is, what should students still need to do themselves? And as someone who works with teachers designing assignments every day, how are you incorporating that question when you sit down to redesign a project or an assessment?
I think that underlies everything that you're trying to do in your own classroom. And so it's sort of, I've always been under the impression of working backwards. So working from sort of the conclusion, like, here are the standards. What are the outcomes that you want students to come away with? Now we have to think about how cognitively students are learning or not learning in some cases, and what we can sort of push to the sideline and go, you know what, that piece is not as important for students to walk away with as this part. This part is sacred to this unit or this project, and I need to ensure that students understand it completely. And so that's where we would say, you know what, there's no AI use. It might be a red light kind of idea here, or assignment here, where other times you might have guidance where it's like, okay, you can sort of utilize AI to help assist you with this part, but we're going to ensure that you're writing this part in class. And so whatever it might be, I think that question has to be at the center of every new unit that you're designing or creating or editing or revising.
Well, Nathan, thank you so much for making us think about turntables and transcripts in the same conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Ira.
That's Nathan Kraai, Director of Innovation and Design Thinking at the Fenn School. We'll link to his piece in the show notes. Nathan calls the vinyl record resurgence a signal, a small human reaction that tells you something the big trend can't. Our next guest is looking at a signal of their own, and it's coming straight from their students. Court Shuller is a middle school English teacher in New Jersey, a national board certified educator, and a reading specialist. This year, they joined the EdSurge Voices of Change Fellowship, a program that pairs working educators with an editorial team to help them turn classroom experience into published writing. I caught up with Court at ISTELive a few weeks ago, where we talked about how their classroom has already made a choice about AI that says a lot about where this conversation is headed. We are recording this week from ISTELive and ASCD Annual in Orlando. Thousands of educators are here, and the energy on the conference floor is hard to describe. Court, welcome to the show. You're a middle school English teacher who also runs a TikTok channel about reading science, and now you're also a writing fellow. What drew you to the fellowship specifically?
Before I joined this fellowship, I was doing another fellowship based around reading science. And that's where I first came up with the idea for my TikTok channel, Science of Reading Snaps. And so my goal there was to create bite-sized professional development. In the age of AI, everybody's attention spans are so short. Teachers have so much on their plates that it's hard to find time for really great quality professional learning. And so my thought was, all right, I can bridge theory to practice for teachers by bringing them into my own classroom and explaining just a little bit of the theory at a time in 30-second to 1-minute videos that maybe they'll watch on their lunch break when they're scrolling. Sometimes some of the best professional development we get is in those moments. And so when I heard about the Voices of Change Fellowship, I saw this as another opportunity for me to reach educators, but in a little bit of a different way. So far I've been doing it in a way where I'm talking all about theory and practice and the science of reading. And I've spent a lot of time developing my voice, as a TikTok educator, as a writer with the Goyen Fellowship. And I think this will be a really interesting experience for me to recenter on, who I am in that and how these things affect me personally.
The Voices of Change program has been running for about 5 years now. And reading the essays, you notice pretty quickly that the most important insights are coming from the people actually in the room with kids like yourself. What do you want to add to that conversation this year?
As a fellow, I'm really hoping to bring people into the classrooms of ELA teachers who are experiencing these great shifts in literacy pedagogy right now. Whether you're an educator who is new to the field, coming out of an educator prep program that maybe didn't prepare you for learning science, to the veteran teachers who have been teaching in a totally different way for 30 plus years, change is hard. And so I think on the ground, in the classrooms, in the schools, teachers are feeling that, and it's definitely adding to some of the pressure that we feel on the day-to-day basis.
And of course, then as a fellow, you're going to have to also bring in your own personal experiences and make yourself a little bit more vulnerable, opening yourself up rather than just saying, here's science of reading, here's this, and not being so prescriptive, but kind of making it a little bit about yourself. Is that going to be easy for you, do you feel, or is it kind of making it a little bit uncomfortable to kind of open yourself up like that?
It can be hard because I've tried to set myself up to be an instructional leader in my district, and to say okay, these are the things that, I know, these are the things that I have expertise on. But at the same time, I also don't know everything, right? I think Heather talked about that yesterday at the main stage, admitting when we don't know things, there's parts of things that make us uncertain. And so I guess that vulnerability of being real with myself, of what are the things that I still don't know, what are the things that I'm still working on, and being able to admit that to, the people who, look to me to support them as they're implementing as well, is definitely hard and something that I need to work on.
Now, yesterday, we were part of a session where attendees actually picked up some pens and wrote. And you took part in that. And you didn't just talk about the writing. You actually got to make yourself vulnerable right there in the middle of the conference, no less. So how did that go for you? What did it feel like? Was it, old hat for you, or was it a little strange to be doing that in the middle of ISTELive?
I would say it's probably exactly what I needed. I've been putting off doing a lot of my writing so far with the end of the school year. And I think one of the things that Cabretti talked about in that session was setting up a writing routine. And that's something that I've definitely struggled with because in addition to writing for Voices of Change, obviously, I'm a full-time educator, I'm a parent, I'm in graduate school, I do all these things. And so it's finding time to build in the routine. And so that has been one of the beauties of coming to ISTE and ASCD Live, is to take moments to pause and think about this stuff. So like the process didn't feel difficult. It was finding the time to like stop and do it, and having somebody like push me to be like, okay, we're going to stop and you're just going to write.
Do your students come to you asking to use AI, just in any capacity, not just as a writer or a reader, but are they just kind of bringing it up independently on their own? Like, hey, can we use AI, or just bring it into the classroom? I'm wondering, because so much of it seems to be pushed down from above, from adults saying, here's some wonderful new technology. I'm wondering if anything is bubbling up that you're hearing from your students about AI.
So what we've done as a district is we've actually really pulled back, and that kind of goes with that fear. You know, as writing teachers, we're kind of like afraid of what AI is doing to, you know, students' ability to write. So we've all scaled back, myself included. My classroom is a majority pen, pencil, paper, and novels right now. We open our Chromebooks for assessments, and AI is all blocked and it's all turned off. And so when kids are using AI, they're doing it without guidance right now, or without supervision. And I think now that I'm here at ISTELive and seeing about the possibilities of instruction, you know, that's even scarier.
I'm also wondering as well, because we talked about this yesterday, your baseline is teaching kids how to read and write. Yeah. And so it's almost like for you personally, in your classroom, it's like, I can't even afford to bring in AI right now. It just would add a level of complexity that even knowing that it could help in certain ways, I don't even have the bandwidth to bring that in right now. I just need to make sure my kids can read and write, and that means pencil and paper. So how are your students engaging with reading AI-generated content? As a reading specialist, what worries you and what gives you hope?
So in reading science, there's a lot of talk right now about this thing called level text. And so level text come from balanced literacy, and basically what it said was, you know, if I have a 7th grader who's maybe has some reading deficits, I should be giving them, you know, 3rd grade level books if that's their reading level. And reading science has really popularized this idea and shown us that that's not good practice. Right? Kids will learn infinitely more if you give them the grade level text and you scaffold up to it. Now, here's where AI comes in, because students are putting the text through AI and getting a summary. And what's even worse is that there's entire like edtech companies that are promoting to teachers, hey, come put this text into our AI generator. Put these classics in, The Giver, All Quiet on the Western Front, Shakespeare. Put it into our AI program, and it's going to give you that same text on a 3rd grade level. And that is an atrocity to literature at its base. But not only that, it's not going to help students learn.
One of the goals of the fellowship is to put educator voices into public conversation alongside researchers and policymakers. Do you think teachers are actually being heard to most of these rooms, or in most of these rooms right now?
Absolutely not, actually. And I think there is great work to be done in that regard. I feel like the answer to everything is always more teacher education, more teacher work. But I think that's the unfortunate reality, right? Knowledge is power. And I think we need to create more access points to get educators in those spaces. Because even when we're making these moves, like we're making these policies for AI and technology and reading science that are important, there's some nuances that aren't quite right. I'll give you an example. So in my own state in New Jersey, we passed a ton of legislation around the science of reading, all great things. And the same year, they also redid our state test so that it was adaptive. Now, it's not AI adaptive as far as I'm understanding it. But learning science tells us that students don't actually respond differently to like lower level reading skills like baseline, explicit versus like implicit questioning. This comes from like an ACT study. And so they're incorporating that into the state test when it's against the learning science and the legislation that they just passed. And so any teacher who's been through the training on the curriculum we're teaching and the training on the state test is going to immediately see those are contradicting one another.
What are you looking forward to most this year as a fellow?
I mean, I always love a good collaborative writing process, right? As an English teacher, like it's a good feeling to be able to share your writing with somebody. It's a good feeling to get feedback on your writing and improve it and see it change from the first draft to later drafts. But I think like the true value in the Voices of Change Fellowship is right there in the name, the fellowship. And that's what I'm really looking forward to most is just talking with people who have, similar inquiries to me, but different experiences.
Court, thanks for joining us here in Orlando. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks so much.
We'll link to the Voices of Change Fellowship page in the show notes so listeners can follow your work as it publishes later this year. Nathan asked, what should still take real effort, even when there's a shortcut? Court answered that question from inside an actual classroom, where the shortcut is one click away on a school laptop. Same question, two very different settings. Before we go, if you're new here, find us wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and hit follow so you don't miss next week's episode. That's it for this week with EdSurge. Thanks to Nathan Kraai and Court Shuller for joining us, and thanks to all of you for listening. For the EdSurge team, I'm Ira Apfel. We'll be back in your feed next week.